The following is a project of our nonprofit newsroom. Support Midcoast Morning and local community-centered journalism today by signing up to be a monthly sustaining donor at chly.ca/donate. It doesn't take much money to support local news.
Hello and welcome to Midcoast Morning. I'm Joe Pugh. We're bringing you updates on the Palestine Solidarity Encampment at Vancouver Island University on today's show. In the last week, representatives from both the encampment and the school's administration have started to hold dialogue with each other. And around 70 staff at the university have signed an open letter raising concerns about the school's security response to the encampment. I reached out to Vancouver Island University to request an interview, both about the dialogue with encampment representatives and the concerns raised by staff in the open letter. A spokesperson for the university said via email that no one was available for an interview, citing preparations for this week's convocation ceremonies. The Palestine Solidarity Encampment is a group of around 15 tents surrounded by a short fence on the quad in front of the library at Vancouver Island University. It's been in place since May 1st, with organizers listing 8 demands, including that the university disclose its investment information. On May 2nd, university security staff hand-delivered a letter to members of the encampment which said that VIU expressly prohibits camping or overnight stays on its premises and that such activities create significant health and safety risks for members of the community. The letter also said that Vancouver Island University students may face suspension, expulsion, and prohibition from graduation and convocation activities. In a May 31st update to the community, however, University President Deborah Saucier wrote that members of the VIU community will not be punished for participating in the encampment. A June 7th update from the university confirmed the sides had taken part in dialogue with a follow-up meeting scheduled for this past Monday. That follow-up meeting ended after representatives from the encampment refused to provide assurances that they would not disrupt the school's upcoming convocation events. Tuesday afternoon, I spoke with a representative from the Palestine Solidarity Encampment on the grounds of VIU. So as of when we're talking, which is Tuesday, yesterday, Monday, June 10th, you had this follow-up meeting scheduled with the administration. According to statements from both you and them, that meeting kind of ended within 30 minutes after they sought assurances that the encampment wouldn't do anything to disrupt convocation that's this week at VIU. Can you tell me more about how that was broached in the meeting?
Absolutely. They had, started that meeting off with a couple remarks, a couple questions, and then dove immediately into wanting to talk about convocation. This was, again, a surprise to us. We were not looking to talk about convocation. We were not prepared to do so, and we're not ready to give assurances about anything because, one, their claim or their that dialogue would take away from what we're here for. We're here about the demands, and the reason we also would not provide immediate assurances is because, again, we were ready to have that conversation as soon as we were talking after we had some discussion regarding our demands and the real reason we were there. However, they proved that their priority was definitely not addressing the encampment. It was not addressing student concerns at all. It turned maybe their priority perhaps was convocation, and that was the reason they had pulled out or set up these meetings in the first place. We were disappointed to find that out for sure. And another reason we refused to speak about it immediately, because, again, we were going to speak about it after, is because our demands have nothing to do with convocation. We have been requesting a meeting with VIU since October of 2023. We have had multiple student walkouts, multiple protests. We've had petitions being signed, and they have been just ignored since then. We've had over 10 actions or emails or communications sent to the admin with these demands in mind, saying, disclosure, divestment, statements, acknowledgement of genocide, and such demands, but they have been ignored. And specifically, demands about the bag search have been on a table since March 9th. this was when we started, emailing admin, this is happening on your campus and such. Again, it's always has been ignored. So to put it, to come to the meeting prepared to just talk about convocation is really a huge disrespect to the work the students have been doing. And it's almost a way to put the blame on the students that they're not willing to talk about these things when their demands center around a genocide that's happening. So we thought that was incredibly disrespectful, unprofessional, and ultimately showed us where VIU's priorities are. We are hoping that they do reverse that with today's meeting that is happening at 12:30. So yeah, we are hopeful that continues, and we have discussions about our demands rather than what is a priority for them over a genocide.
What is on the agenda for today's meeting?
So the meeting is the investment portfolio that we are set, like an investment report that we're set to receive from VIU, as well as a brief discussion on convocation.
I also want to talk about the process of getting to that dialogue in the first place. In a May 17th message from President Deborah Saucier, one of the things included was that Saucier wrote that we have offered and continue to offer dialogue with the Students for Palestine Committee. Can you tell me what was the process like? If that is in the statement, May 17th, why was the dialogue not happening on your end? May 7th, did you receive requests to have some kind of meeting at that date?
Absolutely. So we have had, the admin has reached out to us on May 7th. So since then, there has been back and forth emailing to set up a dialogue and a meeting to have discussions and such. However, I think the main problem here is that the administration does not realize that offering dialogue and having the dialogue have to go hand in hand. They do tend to say, we're going to meet, but then they either never follow up or they say, we're going to meet and we're only going to talk about this thing that has nothing to do with your demands. One of the communications that we had received from them around May 17th was, we are set to meet. Here's a thing. The agenda will be the conduct of the encampment. Again, we're not here to discuss our right to protest. We are here to discuss demands. And clearly the university was not interested in discussing those at all. So when on May 17th, President Saucier did say, yeah, they are offering dialogue, and so were we. Our dialogue, though, was about the demands, about the genocide, about the encampment, where they were more concerned about the PR and what we can and can't do in terms of protesting. So, yeah, I think the major part is that disconnect between offering dialogue about our demands and having dialogue about the demands. They really need to go hand in hand. And this is not the first time we've had this experience with the university. We did end up having a meeting with them in October with President Saucier, in which it was a 10-minute meeting. We provided our concerns, and she had to leave, unfortunately, and we were told that we were going to get followed up with at the end of that meeting, because two of her representatives stayed and we had that conversation. They promised that they were going to relay this information back to the president and then get back to us. However, in an interaction later that month, I was specifically told that there was never a promise to get back to us. So in terms of offering dialogue, absolutely, yeah, they are doing that. They just don't realize that they actually have to follow up on that offer and set up the dialogue about demands. And that's generally how conversations work. And they do tend to think it's a one-sided conversation where they can just talk at us and we can just leave.
On May 31st, in another update to the community, it was written in bold. Let me state that clearly. Members of our community will not be punished for participating in the encampment. What was the impact of seeing that in the statement? Have things changed since then? So
what we have seen in terms of VIU doing that before then is the May 2nd letter, where it threatens arrest, suspension, and expulsion, as well as suspension from convocation services. So we have seen that before then, and what we saw from that statement on May 31st is that these are no longer valid threats that they have against the students. It did bring a somewhat relief to some supporters who were rightfully, had concerns about being arrested, being brutalized, and specifically for protesters that are in vulnerable situations or populations or identities. So there was that statement. However, it is also that followed by that, it's followed by no assurances that any previous misconduct notices and such are now revoked. It doesn't have that exact assurance there. It would have an emotional assurance for sure for students if they know they're not getting arrested and punished. But then again, they don't specifically define a lot of things, and there is obviously that worry that maybe they'll use some loopholes in the statements and such. But however, we are hopeful in the face that they put out this in a good faith way that protects the students using or exercising their right to protest.
The letter also noted, it said there have been some incidents characterized by behavior that was not safe, citing a Board of Governors meeting where it says in the statement that a megaphone was used in a confined space at dangerously high sound levels for 45 minutes. What's your response to that characterization of behavior as being unsafe?
Absolutely. We definitely do not agree that any behavior has caused safety risk on campus at all. That, in a way, in that statement was, we believe, an attempt to villainize the students and the encampment by making it seem like there is a safety concern on campus. We have not created any and will not create any unsafe situations. I think people need to realize that there is a difference between being uncomfortable and unsafe. At no point during the Board of Governors meeting was the sound measured. There were people just sitting there perfectly fine. So, and no concern was made at the time to the safety here. Were people uncomfortable by loud noises? Absolutely. But people do need to also realize that protests are supposed to be disruptive. And we also were not stopping anyone from exiting. In fact, the meeting did end up relocating to a different room. So really, we do refute the idea that any unsafe situations were created. In fact, what we feel the unsafe situation was the one VIU has created in terms of hiring undercover security on campus in plain clothes that sit, one of them pretending to be a student, one of them coming up right to the student's personal space and physically intimidating them. And I know they would justify that by saying they're there for the safety of all students. However, these have not been identified to us. That has not been communicated to us. And the only reason we found out is because of these interactions we have had with these plainclothes security, where they do overstep their boundaries and come up in physical space. So those are unsafe situations because the students here are vulnerable and the security are in a position of power. Having a little loud disruption at a meeting, that's not unsafe. That's just uncomfortable. And people just need to realize that and make that distinction.
The big event on the university calendar this week is convocation. When I reached out to VIU to talk about this story, it was pointed out that everyone is busy preparing for convocation. The meeting on Monday ended on the issue of convocation. Is there something that you would say to maybe students who have graduated or their families who might be, feeling uncomfortable or worried that kind of this moment they've worked for might be disrupted in some way?
Absolutely. We do have part of the encampment students who are also convocating this week, and we do 100% agree and, I agree with the importance of convocation. Absolutely. This is a time to celebrate our achievements. It's a time to just show all the hard work and get credentials for all the hard work that we have been doing for years. We absolutely agree with that, and it is a moment to be celebrated. It's also a time to remember that a genocide that we are complicit in for the past 8 months has created lists and lists of thousands of students who are not able to graduate this year. Whether that because they're wounded, because they're killed, because they have no schools, they have no universities. There are no universities left in Gaza. None. So they have created this situation in Gaza, and we are complicit in this situation. So while we do celebrate our accomplishments, we do have to also realize that some people are not able to because there is something that we are complicit in happening. And I do urge everybody, and I congratulate all the people that are convocating this year and urge them to celebrate. But do keep in mind and take all actions that they personally can to stop their complicity in the genocide. And if that complicity is just by being silent, then it's time to speak up. But again, we do agree that this is, and understand that this is a hugely important time for the scholars, the students who are graduating, the people who are setting up these convocations. Yeah, and absolutely, and congratulations to everybody.
A representative from the Palestine Solidarity Encampment at Vancouver Island University speaking with me Tuesday on campus at VIU. Following that conversation and a subsequent meeting with university administration, the representative said via text that VIU has disclosed their investments and they hope to continue good faith dialogue as soon as possible. An update published to VIU's website Tuesday night at 6 p.m. said that the school received a commitment from the Palestine Solidarity Encampment that their organization would not disrupt convocation ceremonies. It also said that the school shared investment information that was requested at the previous meeting. That information has also been shared publicly on VIU's website. You can find it at viu.ca/budget.
Midcoast Morning is made possible by the Community Radio Fund of Canada's Radio Meters program and listeners like you. Support Midcoast Morning and CHLY's nonprofit newsroom today by becoming a sustaining donor at chly.ca/donate. Local news can't survive without your support. Another way to help us out is to share this show with your friends and tell them why they should support us. Finally, if you're listening to the podcast edition of Midcoast Morning, go and give us a positive review on Apple Podcasts or whatever podcast feed you use. It helps people find us.
A number of VIU faculty are questioning what they say is a disproportionate and expensive security response to the Palestine Solidarity Encampment. An open letter submitted last week and signed by around 70 staff members says that the school has engaged the services of a number of plainclothes security contractors, some of whom the letter says have presented expired BC security worker license cards when asked to show their credentials. I spoke with KJ Reed, who was among those who signed the letter.
My name is KJ Reed. I use they, them pronouns, and I am part librarian and part professor in gender and women's studies at Vancouver Island University.
And you are one of a number of faculty members who signed an open letter that went out last week. Could you tell me how that came about?
Absolutely. So this is the second open letter that we have sent to administration. This particular one is bringing up concerns around security, what we feel is inappropriate levels of security related to the peaceful encampment. So we started to notice that there were plainclothes, big muscly guys hanging out on campus, and we started to ask them who they were, and they wouldn't be forthcoming. They wouldn't give names. So we clued in that they were probably security contractors, and we started to ask for their licenses, which we're legally allowed to do. And they would provide them after much cajoling, but they would cover their actual name with their thumbs, which technically is legal, but it's not the kind of community that we want at VIU, that we have employees on campus who won't share their names. That is kind of antithetical to the community that we want here.
You mentioned that maybe the catalyst for this is the encampment. Can you tell me maybe about how you have experienced the encampment as just a staff member who works at VIU in the library where, you know, it's right in front of the building?
Sure. So when I first got the initial email from the university that described the encampment as quite threatening, and like there were community members coming on to campus, and I thought, what is going on? I'm going to go out there and check this out for myself, because the tone of this email makes it sound very scary. And so I went out and I realized that these folks aren't scary at all. They're super peaceful. They have a right to protest. And so I started questioning the university's press releases and how they're framing this community dialogue, or lack thereof, that's going on. And when I started to notice that they were doing things like serving a notice of trespass within the first couple days of the encampment going up, when they're bringing in extra security at a time of a huge budget deficit, last figure that our CFO sent out was 3 $34.6 million operating deficit. And yet we're hiring plainclothes security to watch the encampment 24/7 from the 5th floor of the library. So you see these dark silhouetted guys, backlit, so you can't see who they are, at all hours of the day, which is to me a completely inappropriate level of security response. We've also hired the associate director of campus security at BCIT as a contractor. He refused to disclose what he was doing on campus other than he was a contractor. And it was only through our legwork that we were able to figure out who he was. So at a time of huge budget crisis with a very peaceful encampment that makes some people uncomfortable but is not a safety risk, I really question why all the extra security, why post for another manager operational security paid at a salary of over $100,000, why bring in contractors, and the ones that they're bringing in have expired licenses, at least 2 of them. One of them was 4 years expired. So we question the need for the security force that has been brought in, especially at a time during budget cuts.
So obviously there is the open letter. Before that, have you raised any of these concerns with anyone at the administration?
Absolutely. Many of us have emailed in and gotten nothing. I raised the issue with the manager of campus security, and it took him 10 days to get back to me, saying, thanks for noticing, and I'll look into it and correct if I need it. And I know that he's busy, but when there are non-uniformed security around, 10 days is not an acceptable response to a community when you have people around that won't give first names.
To the open letter itself, has there been any kind of response from the school?
No, neither open letter number 1, which is about student right to protest, signed by 130 employees, nor the second open letter, signed by 71 employees at last count. We have heard nothing back. And in fact, in the second open letter, we actually specifically demanded that we get a direct response to the open letter, which, quite frankly, when that number of employees send you an open letter, you think you would want to respond, and that we wouldn't have to put that in, but we felt we had to.
What are you hoping would be in a response from the school?
What we want is for them to be transparent about why are they bringing in so much security? Why is it plainclothes? Why do some of them have expired licenses? Why are we hiring an external contractor? Why are we posting for another manager of security when we're cutting programs like music and GIS and engineering technologist? So transparency and communication that is not just through some PR firm, but actual authentic. Speak to your employees, please.
And obviously you've raised maybe some of the concerns of this happening in the context of a financial crisis. Beyond that, do you have any concerns specifically related to the security itself?
I think that it would make sense to have more uniformed guards but we know them. We are fairly friendly with them. We know them by name. We, say, how was your weekend? That kind of thing. So in terms of additional security, that is not what we're protesting here. What we're protesting is the type and the amount. If folks were uniformed and there was a proportional response, that would be one thing, but this is a completely disproportionate response to a peaceful encampment.
Is there anything else you think it's important to share with people on this?
Simply that the senior management team has not been living up to VIU values. What we want is dialogue. The encampment folks want dialogue. Employees want dialogue. Wherever we stand on these issues, we want transparency and dialogue, and we're not getting it.
KJ Reid is an assessment librarian and chair of the Studies of Women and Gender program at Vancouver Island University. Before I sign off for the day, there are two other events that took place yesterday I want to bring to your attention. Tuesday afternoon, a group of protesters entered the office of VIU's Provost and VP Academic. The Instagram page Cowichan Valley Solidarity Network posted a video clip from the protest and described the protesters as a group of VIU alumni and former staff. According to a statement from VIU, RCMP attended but did not interact with the protesters, who left the space through an open window. Also taking place Tuesday was a vigil organized by VIU faculty to honor Palestinian students in Gaza killed in the ongoing conflict. As part of the vigil, a list of names of students who have died was read aloud.
We're just going to start saying the names. It's going to take half an hour again. Just going to mention something. We're all students here, and we're reading the names of other students from our home country. The ages of these students are from 18 to 21, which is basically the average of our age. And just by reading the first two pages, I recognize 6 names.
That clip was from a vigil held Tuesday, was organized by VIU faculty to honor Palestinian students in Gaza killed in the ongoing conflict. That's our show for the day. Thank you for joining me. I'm Joe Pugh, host and producer of Midcoast Morning. Jesse Woodward is our executive producer, and Arby Frew is our technical advisor. You can sign up for CHLY's newsletter at chly.ca/subscribe for updates from our nonprofit newsroom. Our theme song is First One by local Nanaimo band Waste Management. If you have a story you'd like us to cover, email us at news@chly.ca. That's all for now. I'll talk to you on another Midcoast Morning.
Midcoast Morning would not be possible without the funding of the Community Radio Fund of Canada's Radio Meters program and listeners like you. Midcoast Morning is a project of CHLY's nonprofit newsroom. Support nonprofit journalism in Nanaimo and on the Salish Sea today by becoming a monthly sustaining donor at $5 or more per month. Support the program at chly.ca/donate. If you're already a supporter, record a voice memo telling others where you're listening from and why they too should support our work. After you're done, you can email it to us. Also, share the podcast with your friends. While Meta is blocking Canadian users from sharing news content on their Facebook feeds, you can still share our podcast directly with your friends via Facebook or Instagram Messenger. Finally, this program acknowledges and gives thanks to the Snuneymuxw First Nation as we broadcast and podcast from their traditional territory. Thanks for listening.